Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by the founder of PositiveVibes Magazine. He is a mental health and disability advocate. His magazine focuses on telling authentic stories about mental health, wellness, and inspiration. So we're going to be talking to him about his story and everything that he's up to. He's also an entrepreneur. His name is Zane Landin. Zane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you gave a great introduction, but I am 24 years old. I have lived in Chino my whole life. I've experienced mental health conditions from a young age, which really geared me to be an ally. I became a more serious, proactive advocate during my university time because that was a time where my mental health was pretty scattered more than ever. I was definitely at a really low point. This was like, I think, my third year. Engaged in self-harm, a lot of things that, was unfortunate that I was doing. And I wasn't focused. There was a lot going on in my life. So after that, I actually took the semester off because of that. And then, I kind of, I don't want to say reinvented myself, but kind of looked at life a different way, and kind of took advantage of that. And I learned the best way to take care of myself and my mental health after that. And like I said, even though I experienced it when I was a kid, it wasn't to that magnitude. So yeah, a lot of things really changed, and that's when I became more of a serious advocate because I kind of realized that the way I was feeling, even though I felt alone, most of the time we're not. We just feel that way, especially when things are stigmatized or things aren't talked about. So, I realized that more people, thousands, or millions, I mean, are experiencing what I was, and I didn't want people to experience that. And so I became more of a serious advocate, and that's why I still continue to do that today. And then the disability side is, when I got more involved in mental health, I learned about the important intersection of disability and mental health, which is not talked about too much, especially with me growing up with as neurodiverse and kind of struggling in school for the longest time. Getting accommodations helped me a lot. Then I became more of an advocate for disability as well, even though they are the same. But at the time I didn't realize that, disability and mental health are the same. And so, mm, but it's interesting because sometimes you'll see a disconnect where you'll have mental health advocates that don't advocate for disability, which is okay, but sometimes they're not even aware that they're the same thing. So that's why I make that distinction. So that is kind of my story and why I identify as, an activist and advocate for those communities. And yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Well, you're also the founder of Landing Dreams. Tell us about that and tell us what that company does.
Oh yeah, well, I'll start off with the magazine because it goes into that. I mean, I started the Positive Vibes magazine in May of 2020 to address the lack of the representation of mental health stories in the mainstream media, which I think is still a problem being faced today. That, when you can have the media report authentic stories, you'll see people actually start caring about the subject more. But mental health is still something rarely talked about in the media, and I think once we see change in that, we'll see a bigger change, significant change in the country. Maybe not as big as I'm thinking, but more of an understanding, I hope. And so I started the magazine because of that, and it was it's just a digital magazine, and we interview people, across the globe that have experienced mental health conditions or mental health advocates, and just have different stories, different things to share, things that they used to heal. And then it was recently that I did Landing Dreams PR because someone we featured, her name is Aisha. She reached out to me because her and I kind of kept a relationship after the feature, and she kind of requested that I be her publicist. And at the time, I was in school studying public relations, so I was learning a bit about that, but I wasn't an expert. I did inform her that I was still a student, didn't know too much about what I was doing, and decided to kind of create my own brand out of that, or an agency, because I had other people I could represent that I knew from the magazine. So the magazine really helped me create that network where I can provide that service. So what I did was I just kind of supported them, advocated for them to get on platforms, podcasts, magazines. I don't really do it as much anymore because I'm moving into a new full-time career right now. But it was something I did for a while, and I was able to get, um, my clients that I had onto pretty interesting podcasts and different speaking engagements. So that was exciting.
Okay, well, you also went to Washington, D.C. for the first Mental Health Youth Action Forum. Tell us all about that and what you did and what that experience was like.
Oh gosh. It was a phenomenal experience, something that I was really proud to be a part of and really proud to see the Biden administration take care in mental health and actually drive this conversation that we don't really get to see often. But it was a conglomeration of the White House, MTV, and several mental health nonprofits who all came together to host this forum. It was hosted by MTV, but it had so much more support from all these different organizations. I saw the application November, December, and I kind of convinced myself I wasn't going to get it. So I think that even with the stuff that we accomplish, we still don't see our value. So I applied because I think it's important to hit the apply button. I wasn't really confident that I was going to get it though. Um, and then, well, luckily, a month or two later, I was informed that I was a semifinalist, submitted another application, and then lucky enough, I got in. I mean, yeah, and I say lucky because they didn't choose that many people, and it was really competitive. So I was really proud, and I really do think the magazine is the reason why that I was able to do that. Just because it was my own venture, something that I personally did myself, and I just gained such a more like understanding of mental health as I was interviewing a lot of people. So I think that helps so much. But the experience, there was an online portion before we actually attended the forum in May, and so we kind of learned about one another. We got to speak to people from NTV and the White House even before we attended in person. But that was like 6 to 7 weeks, so it was kind of like it was designed as kind of a boot camp in a way, which was pretty cool. But when we actually were there, it was kind of a surreal experience. Especially since that was, I mean, I've been in Washington, D.C. like a long time ago, but I don't really remember it that well. But this was a really good experience to be there again. And even though there wasn't enough time, because the forum was only 3 days, it was still a neat experience to, be in a place like Washington, D.C. And then the forum itself was Wednesday, which was at the White House where we were kind of all sitting on this podium or this stage where they chose 6 of the 30 of us to speak. I wasn't chosen, but it was still really cool to hear their stories. And I got to meet really fascinating people, like that were in the audience, that were high up government people, worked for federal government, and then there was, the people that also spoke, which was there was Dr. Murthy, the Surgeon General, Dr. Biden, the First Lady, and they had Selena Gomez there as the keynote because she has her share of mental health experiences as well, and I think she came out with a new documentary about it. So, and then, so then after the forum, and it was broadcasted on different television stations, which is really cool. And then after the event, we kind of went back into where we were waiting, this blue room that they had, like this little room that you can see the front of the White House, like you can see from behind it. It's pretty cool. And then we were fortunate enough that Biden did show up, President Biden, that came in and kind of talked to us about his experience and thanking us for the work that we do. And it was a good experience because on the press release they didn't mention he'd be there, So even the people who planned this, I don't think that they knew he would be there. I think he definitely took the time out of his schedule to rush to see us because he only spent like 10 minutes with us and had to leave right away. But overall, it was an amazing experience that I am really privileged to have. Not a lot of people can say that. And I do not take that lightly. Like, I think it's a really important, and I take that experience wherever I go. So everywhere I go, I'm always going to be advocating um, on behalf of mental health and making people feel psychologically safe or, try and spread resources to people that need it, anything I can do. So yeah, that's my experience at the forum.
Wow, that's pretty exciting there. So explain to people why mental health is important to you. I know each person has their own story, but why is it important to you?
Yeah, no. I explained a little bit why it's important. I mean, I have my lived experience, experienced it from a young age, but I think that, people forget that every single person has mental health. Not everyone has mental health conditions, that are diagnosable. But we all have mental health, we all have physical health. Um, and that's why it's important. But the main reason why it's important is because we can see the drastic effects that untreated mental health can have on someone. Um, whether it leads to violence or if it leads to suicide, like people's lives are lost when untreated mental health lingers on too much. And we see it all the time. I mean, there's what the stat is like either it's 240 or 280. Every single time a person dies by suicide, there's at least 280 or 240 stats or 240, 280 uh, attempts. So, there's so many lives being attempted to be taken. And there's lives that are just lost every day to suicide and the journey of mental health. Um, and it's not that mental health leads to this, it's the untreatedness of it. So, a lot of people assume that people with mental health conditions are violent, but rarely they are actually. If you look at the stats, it's like 3 to 5% people with mental health conditions are violent. But for the most part, it's not even due to the nature of their mental health. It could be just the untreatedness of it. And because it's untreated, it leads to that. And that's why someone who their mental health is not being addressed and they're living with it, then they try to die by suicide. And it's like, so people's lives are literally being lost. And that's why mental health is really important. And it's just really important to always take care of yourself holistically, body, mind, spirit, every single thing you want to take care of. And so we're focused on taking care of our bodies, which is good. But we're not going to be holistically healthy unless we take care of our mind too, and our spirit. So I think that's why it's important.
Well, in your bio, you talk about grieving. So
Mhm.
explain to people what grieving means to you and how people can overcome their fears.
I mean, for me, I never thought, I mean, grieving is kind of a fear of mine. I mean, because I experienced it last year, January of 2021, my mom passed away. And so that was hard. And I've experienced grief before, but not like that. And so, it is kind of a fear. I didn't think it was before. I never even thought about it because I never saw anything like that happening. But to me, grief is losing anything, losing something. If it's losing yourself, losing a memento or an object, or losing a loved one, or losing an animal or a pet, losing something that you care deeply about. That's what I think, or something that impacts your identity. So that's what I think grieving is, and you know, people overcoming their fears. I think it's interesting. I mean, overcoming your fear of grief is that's a hard one, but overcoming your fears like public speaking or taking that leap. I think the important thing is just to try it, or put yourself out there. And you don't have to go that completely out there. I think some people think it's all or nothing. There's nothing wrong with going from 0 to 5 instead of going from 0 to 100. I think that's where a lot of people make a mistake, including myself, because I do that a lot too. Something that we all do. But I think it's important to, relieve your anxiety or to reduce your fears. It's just put yourself out there. If you really want to face your fears, and just take baby steps and take one day at a time. Like I said, I think people go from 0 to 100 too quickly. And then when they go to 100, they get overwhelmed. And then they end up going back to zero instead of going from 5 to 10 to 15 and slowing down and trying to make it this progressive journey rather than something you want a quick fix for. That's why even sometimes with people who try and lose weight, including myself, we'll go from 0 to 100 and then we'll get burnt out real quickly. And so that is what my advice is on that. Hopefully that answers your question.
It definitely does. Tell us about any current or upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about.
Oh, not yet. I mean, I'm thinking of starting my own podcast on mental health or imagination, bringing in people to talk about that unexplored, uncharted territory, which I think is really cool. That might be something. And then the last thing is I am moving to Washington, D.C. actually, come full circle, because I just went there in May, but I'll be moving there for a new job. So I'm really looking forward to that. So those are the two main things I'm probably going to be working on that are new projects.
Okay, well, congratulations on that new job. Throw out
Thank
your
you.
contact information, your website. How can people keep in touch with you and keep up with everything you're doing as far as mental health advocacy and disability advocacy?
Sure, yeah, definitely reach out. I mean, you have my name, Zane Landin. That's my handle on everything. On Instagram, LinkedIn, uh, Twitter, and Facebook. So you can connect with me on there. And you mentioned the magazine. The handle is Positive Vibes Mag, and you can find that on Instagram and other platforms as well. So that's a way of keeping in contact with me on my personal Instagram and LinkedIn. And yeah, please definitely reach out if you have any questions about anything.
All right, close us out with some final thoughts, maybe something that I forgot to touch on that you would like to talk about, or any final thoughts that you have for the listeners.
Mm, I don't have I don't think there's anything that I didn't want to talk about. But I just kind of want to stress the importance of just taking care of yourself and giving yourself the grace that you need. I think as people, we're so like hard on ourselves, of course, more than anyone else. We hear that all the time. We are our own worst enemy, but we still have to hear it all the time. Even though people say it's cliche, like we already know. Doesn't seem like we get it though. Because everyone, including myself, we all have a hard time still taking care of ourselves and just giving yourself a graceful moment or period. When you make a mistake or you do something or there's an error, there's nothing wrong with that. We're not robots, we're humans. And then also, celebrate yourself every day. Try and find if you don't think you have a win, try and find that small win to share victory with, because I think that's important when you celebrate yourself and you see your worth. And then if you start seeing yourself, or if you start seeing the things that you didn't notice every day, and you start celebrating yourself, convincing yourself that you are worth it, I think is what's important. Because there's a lot of people that don't see their worth, again, including myself. So these are things that I do to try and help myself see that. It's easy to forget your accomplishments or your backstory or your journey, but it's important to keep them alive, and give yourself that celebration.
Ladies and gentlemen, Positive Vibe Mag, Zane Landin. Check him out. Check out everything that he's up to and support him in any way you can. If you enjoy this episode or like this show, please be sure to tell a friend. Also, follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Zane, thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you're doing in regards to mental health advocacy and disability advocacy.
Awesome. Thank you again.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.